Angelo Popple's been here for hours. You know why? Why? His cane stuck in the sand. He'd been going around in a circle. Bless Bobby the Brain Heenan. Truly, what a wonderful man he was. One of the greatest, if not the greatest, wrestling color commentator of all time. Truly the greatest wrestling manager of all time. What a mind he had for professional wrestling. What a goddamn career he had by 1995. The fact that he left the WWF was just basically going to try Hollywood, and then Eric Bischoff decided to throw truckloads of Ted Turner's money at him and then not take his advice, not tap into that goddamn brain of the brain, and make him a color commentator where even though he was going half speed, sometimes quarter speed, sometimes 10% speed, he still outshined everybody not named Mike Tenay. My goddamn Christ, fuck cancer. I wish Bobby the Brain Heenan was still here, but truly, one of the all-time fucking greats. I'm John Renton with the Retro Review / Redux of WCW Bash at the Beach 1995 from the beach in Mike Huntington Beach, California. So, yeah, I did this video about 5 years ago, and I felt like adding more snark, more jokes, and a few more factoids and everything, and just generally taking the piss out of this very, 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 very lazy fucking pay-per-view. Now, this is in the lead-up to them getting Monday Night Nitro off the ground. Like, they were going to be at the Mall of America not even 2 months after this pay-per-view went live. And honestly, it was almost like by, just sheer happen circus pants that they somehow managed to stumble into that. Because if you take a look at a pay-per-view like this, all the star power they had, yes, the visual of being on the actual beach was cool, but god damn it, I mean, they said they had 9,500 people there. I don't know about that. Not based on the aerial shots. They had a good amount of people there. But speaking of people, speaking of stuff, let's talk about factoids, such as Bash at the Beach 1994. They were in Orlando, 14,000 people. How many comped? Who knows? But they had 225,000 pay-per-view buys. And then the following year, 1996, that was, of course, the Hostile Takeover match where Hulk Hogan said, if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, you people wouldn't be here. Hogan telling us how he felt about those people a number of years ago, and we didn't even take to it. But that wasn't Daytona Beach. It had around 8,300 people there and did do 250,000 pay-per-view buys. By the way, the 1995 Bash at the Beach did 160,000. So, yeah, they were way down from the previous year, and then they would go way back up. Now, if we want to talk about the 1995 pay-per-views, they weren't doing one every single month. That's the thing that some people tend to forget. I mean, I think by 96 they were, but we had Super Bowl V. That was in the Baltimore Arena, and they had 13,390 fans. Remember that figure. Remember that. They had around 180,000 pay-per-view buys. I believe that was for, if I remember right, I think it was Hogan and Vader in a cage, because you did have Savage and Flair also in a big cage match. And then you had Uncensored 95, which was in Tupelo. That had topped out at around 5,782 people. That, of course, had the King of the Road match. And general tomfoolery and bullshit, and it also had Hogan beating Vader in a strap match by dragging Ric Flair to all four corners and beating him. That actually happened. That is not me just making something up because WCW. That also had 180,000 pay-per-view buys. So, okay, they were in a pretty good sweet spot. Then Slamboree 95. St. Petersburg, Florida, 7,000 fans. And they were down to 110,000 pay-per-view buys. You know why? Because people were getting sick of Hulk Hogan. They can say that the fans were not booing Hogan at this point. They were starting to. They were starting to percolate. Because even though he did have fans in certain strongholds, Florida in particular, they were starting to kind of turn on him. And then they really would when we got to another pay-per-view a little bit later on. But Great American Bash 95, that actually was a pretty good pay-per-view overall. Opened up with Pillman versus Alex Wright. Yes, the man with the big bratwurst, as Wrestling Bios would say. And they were in date. No, I'm not going to do the dance. I'm tired because I can't even do the dance. Big bratwurst. Do. See, I can't even do the dance. I don't know why I can't. It's such a simple dance, but I don't know why I can't do it. Dayton, Ohio, 6,000 fans, 100,000 pay-per-view buys. So, oh boy, don't worry, it can't get any worse. It can get worse. Fall Brawl 95. This was the first pay-per-view of the Monday Night War era. And they were in Asheville, North Carolina at the Asheville Civic Center, I believe. 6,600 fans. They were down to 95,000 pay-per-view buys. That was, if I recall correctly, because Flair and Savage main event at Great American Bash 95. They were the co-main event for this pay-per-view. That was Hogan. It was Hogan, Sting, Savage, and Luger against the Dungeon of Doom, which I believe was John Tenta. Kevin Sullivan. Kamala was there. Who the fuck else was there? Who else was there? I think it was Zodiac, a.k.a. Brother Brudai. You know, Brutus Beefcake, who got more money from WCW than he fucking deserved for the amount of work that he could do, i.e. none. But then we get to Halloween Havoc 95. This is where people really started to turn on Hogan. They were in Detroit. This is the second year in a row that they were there. And they had 13,000 fans. And they did 120,000 pay-per-view buys. That was to see the Monster Truck match, as well as Hogan pushing the Giant or letting the Giant fall off the roof. But don't worry, the Giant was fine and then came back and beat Hogan when the Yeti showed up and they looked like they were trying to DP Hogan. That was something that actually happened because WCW. Then World War III 95. They were at the Norfolk Scope. 12,000 fans, and they were down to 90,000 pay-per-view buys. And don't worry, they're going to end 1995 on a strong note. Starrcade 95, they were in Nashville. 8,200 people, 75,000 pay-per-view buys. Hogan wasn't on the World War III or the Starrcade 95 card. That was the WCW New Japan, World Cup thing. It was 2 teams, 1 World Cup. You're welcome. Imagine all those guys trying to do that video. You're welcome. I'm just going to continue to say that to make you uncomfortable. So yeah, they had nowhere to go but up. And to be quite honest, they were starting to percolate. But really until they got to Bash at the Beach 96, which I think had the same amount of pay-per-view buys that Uncensored 96 had. And that was, of course, the 3-tiered cage match where Z Gangster and the Final Solution, Jeep Svensson, was there. The guy that was Bane in Batman and Robin, believe it or not, who unfortunately passed away in 98. So yeah, let's talk about this pay-per-view. It sucked. It was terrible. Like, even 14-year-old me knew this pay-per-view was bad, and this pay-per-view somehow got worse. It has gotten worse 5 years on. The main event, or Saturday night matches, whatever the fuck it was Johnny B. Bad defeating Chris Kanyon in about 2 minutes. And Chris Kanyon actually was one of the lifeguard lumberjacks a little bit later on. I forgot that Chris Kanyon was working in WCW at this point. So then they had Hawk defeat jobber Mark Starr. That was in 1 minute and 25 seconds. That was when Hawk and Animal had their separation issues, and I believe sometime after this, late 95, early 96, they would reunite. And then Dick Slater and Bunkhouse Buck, Dick Slater, that shitbag. And Bunkhouse Buck defeated Marcus Alexander Bagwell and Alex Wright in 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Now, let me say, even though obviously this is when he was wrestling, apparently Buck Bagwell, he got in a car accident in 2020 and somehow complications from that led to him unfortunately needing his leg amputated. Now, I hope that WWE reaches out, as he was a former talent, to help him out. Buff's had his struggles. I'm not saying Buff's a perfect guy. But this way they could help out a former talent with some money. Hopefully his colleagues and others can, help him out and everything. Because it's a very terrible thing. His career is, full-time career may have ended up being short. But Buff did leave a lot of good memories and everything and didn't deserve that. He truly did not deserve that. Even though he has personal issues and a lot of his drug issues and everything, a lot of that was his own doing. He did not deserve this. He cleaned up his life. I tip my hat to him. So hopefully he can get the help he needs, get a prosthetic, whatever, continue to live a long, healthy life. Because to think, I don't even think Buff's 60. And he's been through a whole lot of stuff already. I do find it ridiculous that there were people that were doing clickbait videos for him, without including a GoFundMe. I have not seen a GoFundMe, or I would include the GoFundMe in the description. I just wanted to send my thoughts to Buff Bagwell. That's all, like Buff or anybody related to Buff's going to watch this. But just as a wrestling fan, I wanted to send my thoughts to him. Not do something clickbaity like Maven did and a few others did. Let's be respectful of wrestlers. So anyway, let's talk about this pay-per-view, because I'm going to be disrespectful as fuck to some of the people on this card. Shivani and Heenan were, welcoming us. Shivani then mentions it's the largest U.S. crowd to see a WCW pay-per-view. Okay. It is not 13,390 people like at the Baltimore Arena. There is no way there was 9,500 people there. There might have been 7,000. There was a sizable crowd and some good, shots of the crowd, but I refuse to believe there were 13,000, 14,000 people there. So it couldn't have been the largest goddamn crowd. Now, it wasn't even as large as the crowd in, I believe, for the Baltimore Bash in 89. I don't believe it was even as big as the Baltimore Bash in 88. So, no, I don't fucking believe for a goddamn second it is the largest crowd to see a WCW pay-per-view event. U.S. crowd. Because Collision in Korea had already happened at this point. More on that here in a bit. But, no, and I like Shivani, don't get me wrong, but yeah, he just was fed bullshit or just decided to say it. Thinking nobody would fact check. 20 years later. They did a package on Ming, by the way. Now, they made it seem like he was trained in several martial arts and he's a badass and everything. And he is a badass. I mean, I'm legit scared of Ming. But this thing was kind of goofy. And then the narration said the fight will continue until the breathing stops. Termination. Victims are many. Friends are few. Fear is widespread. But enough about the Benoit household and the message that you would see etched on the goddamn doormat as you would go in. And it was also etched on the ceiling as if to say, get out before Chris does something to you too. I know Chris wasn't part of this, but I just wanted to take a shot at Chris Benoit because Chris Benoit deserves a shot taken at him. I mean, what the fuck's he gonna do? Is his ghost gonna come after me? No, he ain't. And it's not like he's shouting from up there. He's down there in hell. So anyway, Sting talks about his hometown, says it's his hometown about 18 million times. He's fired up, probably on a lot of caffeine at this point. And he was just going insane. Showtime, woo! Don't get me wrong, big Stinger here, love Sting. Was fortunate to be able to see him, even though he wasn't in in-ring capacity, at a couple AEW shows. That was very, very fucking thrilling. He showed up to celebrate with Darby when he won the TNT title at the first AEW show, the Dynamite, that was on the same day as Wrestle Kingdom 2023, and he also showed up at the end of Wrestle Dream 2023. So that was cool. I didn't get to see him wrestle, but that's fine. It was still nice. So, the ring, and I'm sorry, but the ring on a goddamn, platform, sand in so many places. Michael Buffer doing the ring introductions for the championship matches, or at least some of them. I think for this one, for the co-main event and the main event, Michael Buffer seems like a nice guy, but I've never really cared for him, and they wasted so much money with him. I mean, what the fuck was it? $100,000 per appearance? Even if it was $50,000 per appearance, you could have given that to some of the talent, and it would have made just as much of a difference. It would have made just as much of a difference for the pay-per-view. I mean, I'm sorry. Anyway, Sting versus Ming, with Colonel Rob Parker decked out in bling. It's for the U.S. title in a championship ring. Can I come up with more shit? Probably. Not that I expected Ming and Sting to go crazy with, like, Hurricanes and all this kind of stuff and everything, but they did a few things, but really everybody was just kind of going through the motions here. And not that I blame Ming, because who's going to tell Ming he has to do extra stuff? I'm not. I choose to live. But martial arts strikes, and a lot of nothing happens for a while. Sting tries for a Scorpion. Ming tries for his variation. He tries the Stinger Splash later. Sting does. And gets stopped by a foot on the ropes. And then Ming hits a splash off the second or top rope. I think off the second rope. 1, 2. Very close kick out, and the crowd was starting to boo. And then soon after, Sting got a roll-up for 3. And then Ming attacked afterwards, and Hawk showed up. Well, this would lead to Sting and Booker T. Remember how Sting and Booker T faced off against the Road Warriors at Uncensored 96? Remember how bullshit that was? I mean, I know this is months away, but still. Gene Mean, of course, Mean Gene, with Jimmy Hart and Renegade, who really just ended up being plain old Rick. And I know that's a terrible thing to say. It's terrible that he took his own life. Never the answer. Whatever circumstances led to it, is still terrible. Because he was only 33 when he passed away. And that was in March of 99, so he was just shy of 30 here. The Renegade was a terrible character. The Renegade was a career-killing character. Career-destroying. Whatever you want to go with. The fact that they couldn't get the Ultimate Warrior in WCW in 95 probably was an indication they probably should have brought him in 98. By the way, fuck the Ultimate Warrior. I'm glad he's dead. But they made Rick act like the Ultimate Warrior, which was stupid. It was the dollar store, the bargain basement version of the Ultimate Warrior. By the way, and he could do a few more things than the Warrior could, than Hellwig could. I mean, he could at least hit a top rope splash. He could at least do some stuff, but he was not very good. I'm going to illustrate that in this match here in a little bit, but I feel bad for the guy, but the career of Rick, even if he hadn't gotten this gimmick, because think about it, after he had lost the TV championship, he was, just turned into like a generic, almost Native American biker-like character. He was teaming up with Joe Gomez. It was another jobber. Sorry if Joe Gomez is still alive, but it's true. And Renegade just floated around in the mid-card until like late 98, early 99 when he got fired and WWE didn't come calling. I don't know why he didn't just try Japan. Japan might have taken him. It would have been some money. WWE might have been able to do something with the guy, but he probably would have just been low on the card and just gained a couple years. It's still a shame that he took his life. It still is. What was almost as much of a shame was watching Renegade basically slum it against Paul Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful. This is before he got wonderful. The arm atrophy isn't wonderful. This arm is shrinking. I can't be lifting because my neck hurts. It's not wonderful. That's not even close to the theme, but you're welcome. And bless Paul Orndorff. He passed away as well. One of the greatest heels and one of Hogan's greatest opponents. Had one of the biggest money-drawing tours of Hogan's 4-year championship run. But it was Renegade with Jimmy Hart defending the WCW TV championship. The Renegade, not Jimmy Hart. I would have actually put money on Jimmy Hart being a better TV champion at this point. Bless Jimmy Hart. I'm a Mount Rushmore of wrestling managers. But Rick could not overcome this gimmick. This gimmick was terrible. Orndorff's atrophy was out of control. Eventually, Paul tumbled out off the platform into the sand, which must have hurt. He threw sand in the Renegade's eyes, who didn't know how to sell shit. He tried to hit a couple drop kicks, and my God, he hit 1-foot drop kicks like Kerry Von Erich would have in 1995, which is kind of eerie considering Kerry Von Erich passed away due to his own doing on February 18th, 1993. And he still would have hit a bare 1-foot drop kick. Kerry never got eliminated from the 1991-1992 Rumbles because only 1 foot touched the floor. The Renegade would eventually win with a belly to back, but he would get his shoulder up. Because I guess they wanted to protect Orndorff, despite the fact Orndorff would be done pretty much in the ring by September. And then Orndorff attacked the Renegade and got a pop when he hit a pile driver. But then Renegade sat up. And the crowd booed. They were already saying bullshit. So anyway, Kevin Sullivan and the Taskmaster and King Curtis a.k.a. the Master, the Dungeon Doom Master, the guy with the huge gig marks. It was like Abdullah the Butcher. Sullivan! You know, the guy, the screaming, like the bald Orson Welles guy. Except I think Curtis's career was alive and well in 95. I don't think Orson Welles lived into the 90s. If he did, wasn't long. So they summoned Kamala, and more on Kamala here in a bit. Jim Duggan says he will follow the rules, according to Commissioner Nick Bockwinkel. Who, yes, Nick Bockwinkel was the commissioner for WCW at this point. Kamala with the Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan, against Hacksaw Jim Duggan. This was on a pay-per-view in 1995 that people paid for. Duggan may have been past his prime, but Duggan could still contribute more. It just... I know why they did this, because they were trying to acquiesce to Hogan's, like, wishes. Bischoff was stupid for bringing in some of the people that he brought in. I mean, I'm sorry, he was. Just fucking dumb. And all due respect to Kamala, who at this point was pretty much retired. I mean, or at least part-time, because he was doing like moving truck stuff or driving a semi and earning just as much money doing that, because apparently he didn't do too well in like the last run that he had for the WWF. But Hogan brought him in. I don't think he was in there past Fall Brawl 95 because of pay disputes, which I kind of don't blame him for leaving. And he would continue to wrestle sporadically, but then unfortunately he would lose his legs due to complications from diabetes and everything. But as for the match, there was a bear hug for about 1 minute. This match lasted 6 minutes. And then commentary mentions how the Giant showed up and confronted Hogan at the last pay-per-view. And oh my God, he confronted him there and he confronted him everywhere. And he hit him here, he hit him there, he hit that rascal everywhere. Speaking of rascals, I have not brought somebody on this camera for a while. So I am going to bring the baby, the producer. What do you think of the Giant? You know, I showed you when the Giant and the Yeti showed up. And you just didn't understand what was going on. So anyway, let's see. Let me check my notes here. I'm looking here on the ground while I, you know, pet the kitty. Pet the kitty. Your foot. Your big claws. Hey. I've worked 6 straight days. I got 4 more to go. You wanted me home. By the way, adopt, don't shop. Adopt, don't shop. You should do the Kamala Belly thing. Hi. Should I let you go? Okay. So anyway, yeah, Kamala ended up using a Kevin Sullivan distraction along with the Zodiac, Brother Brudai. And yeah, Kamala won a pay-per-view match in 1995 over Jim Duggan. WCW, ladies and gentlemen. So, a kid hands some flowers to the Diamond Doll, who lost her flower well before this, but I digress. DDP with Kimberly, a.k.a. the Diamond Doll, and Max Muscle, who did not last very long. In general, I actually think he passed away in 99. Against Dave Sullivan, Evad himself. They thought that Dave Sullivan should get a pay-per-view match in 95. Oh, Eric Bischoff, you fucking drunk. And, dear God, David sucked, is what I point out, or Dave sucked. Well, I mean, David didn't suck. Mike sucked. I'm talking about the Von Erichs, I'm sorry. David got hit with the cutter. There you go. It's just bad. This was really, really bad. Harlem Heat then were cutting a promo along with Sherry. And Sherry always looked so good and fit in with Harlem Heat just fine. I forgot how Southern Sherry sounded in her promos. Like, I mean, given where she was born, it makes sense. I just always forgot about how Southern she sounded. And it was more pronounced here. But it was Harlem Heat with Sister Sherry against the Nasty Boys, Knobs and Sags, against the Blue Bloods. Sir William Regal and Earl Robert Eaton. Why this was funny to me, I don't know. It was a triangle match For the tag titles, Harlem Heat were the champions. Harlem Heat and the Nasty Boys had faced off on numerous pay-per-views. Bless Bobby Eaton. One of the true all-time greats, especially in tag team wrestling, and so smooth in the ring. And it's terrible he passed away. But this was a mess. I mean, there was a coin flip to determine which two teams would start, but then the teams would just often brawl and one team would tag, and it made no sense. It made no sense. Heenan couldn't follow it. None of this worked. They have a point where Sags backdrop Booker onto Regal, and so Booker's on top of Regal, and then Sags ends up sitting on both of them. 1, 2, 3. The Nasty Boys won, except Booker was below him, pinned Regal, and there you are. So that's what happened there. So, yeah, Harlem Heat retained. Sherry then talked more about how they're the best team that Dick Slater and Bunkhouse Buck got next. Oh boy, 2 Southern boys against 2 African Americans in a Southern-based promotion. What could possibly go wrong? Flair then basically says that he swept Liz off her feet, and then Hogan got punched in the face by Randy, and then Flair slapped Randy's dad because he got in my way. Also because Lanny was signed to a contract for 4 years. Lanny Poffo was signed to a WCW contract for $250,000 a year for 4 years. Guess how many matches Lanny Poffo wrestled for WCW, at least on television? 0. Fucking 0. So, anyway, Heenan really hated Shivani. I just know that. You could tell with their, the looks they had for him. So, the Baywatch crew shows up. Pamela Anderson and various others. Heenan stood on his chair to look at them. And then, he had been here for hours. Why is Kane's, been here all day. Why is Kane's stuck in the sand? He's been going around in a circle. Randy Savage versus Ric Flair in a lifeguard match. Arn Anderson was one of the lifeguards. It's a lumberjack match. But lifeguards, because they're on the beach. Yeah, there were some beaches going on here. Not their best match, but it was better than what we got so far. But that's not saying much, and it was better than the main event. Flair did target the knee. This is after, by the way, Flair tried to do a jump off the top, but he hit the top of Randy's head and busted his jaw and was like, Well, given what Flair allegedly did to that flight attendant, maybe it isn't the worst thing in the world. But Savage roared back after Flair kept targeting the knee. Arn hit a DDT at one point, but that was just a 2 count, a backslide for 2, and eventually Savage was able to overcome and hit the sky elbow 1, 2, 3. And while they set the cage up, they killed a lot of time. This pay-per-view on the cock is 2 hours and 24 minutes. And it feels like they've taken age to set up the cage. Because they set up one piece at a time. Because you can't lower something, there's no canopy. And this is when they were setting up the chain link fence and everything, so they had to set it up. And it was very loose, by the way, very loose. Almost as loose as a lot of the women on that beach. So, Vader had been doing something called the Roadkill Tour. But enough about Adrian Adonis. Vader was way fired up. It's Vader time. And bless Vader. Bless him for trying this. But he really should have beaten Hogan for the title, but he was never going to beat Hogan for the title. Then Collision in Korea ad. It was a cool visual, and it was a cool dark side of the ring, but nevertheless. So, Hogan is backstage with Jimmy Hart, interviewed by Gene Mean, and of course we have Dennis Rodman, aka Rodzilla. The reason he is there is because Hogan felt he was one of the good ones, brother. So, talks about, the match and everything, and Rod being involved in this, and Vader comes out with his helmet. Without Harley Race, I think Harley Race had actually gotten in a car accident at this point, because I don't think he was with Vader anymore. And Hogan entrance with the Baywatch crew, including the blonde-haired guy that was always in shape. I forgot the name. I watched a couple seasons of Baywatch. Believe it or not. I was a teen, and there were women running around. Their tits were flopping, so why the fuck wouldn't I watch it? Terrible show, though. Hogan and Vader steel cage match for the WCW title. You can win by either pinfall, submission, escaping through the door, or escaping over the top and to the floor. Maybe if you just were able to stand up longer than your opponent, you could have won too. Why not just give them other ways to get out? Why not just have his Uber pull up and, when he gets out of the ring, as Jesse Ventura said about Damian Priest against Drew McIntyre. But Hogan flat out buried Vader here. I mean, yes, Vader got in his shots, but nobody believed for a second that Hogan was going to sell long, and Hogan didn't sell very well. Hogan sold better at Uncensored and at Super Brawl than he sold here. And that's saying something. But yeah, Hogan got some cheers. There were more casual fans here. The cage wall bumps were so soft. Vader attempted to do a shooting star press and rotated about a third of the way that he needed to. It was really bad. No wonder he tore his shoulder up and had to get shoulder surgery after he debuted at the 96 Rumble and took out Gorilla Monsoon. And then was never the same again. But Hogan slammed him and, hurt his back, but then would later no-sell and would just do a bunch of stuff. Hogan was barely bleeding, like he's Duncan Sheik. Duncan Sheik talking about his wife at that time of the month, I guess, since it was barely breathing. And then the Kevin Sullivan was there. I can never say that. Kevin Sullivan and Zodiac show up, and Rodman runs them off. And then posing, leg drop, escape over the top to the floor after he sends Vader crashing onto the ropes. And it seems like he might have torn his groin, too. And that's it. So Hogan won and pay-per-view over. Shivani and Heenan are acting like, oh, everything's cool, and they're off the air. But then suddenly we're back, we're still on the air, and Flair shows up and is yelling at Vader, like, why couldn't you win? And this would lead to Vader against Arn and Flair, I believe, at the following Clash the following month. And it was supposed to lead to a Vader face turn. But then the fight with Paul Orndorff that was talked about in the dark side of the ring and everything and all that. And yeah, that's it. That's Bash at the Beach 95. Got some jokes in, made some comments, and had some fun. Let me know your thoughts on Bash at the Beach 95 in the comments, please. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Retland. Until we meet again. In fact, until we meet again... Until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Yeah? Okay. Happy trails to you guys. Adopt, don't shop.